What's up YouTube? Today's video I'm gonna go over the lightning strike build a little bit more. I'm also gonna give some budget options for the build because I do think that lightning strike is probably the better skill. A lot of people ask about whether frost blades or lightning strike is better, and it turns out that lightning strike is actually probably the superior skill. It has more damage with lower gear levels because its base damage is higher, and it can also hit the mob and so you can hit with the melee hit and projectile without having to utilize Hydro Spear, unlike Frost Blades. So the skill is just vastly superior, so I do think it's actually a very, very good budget option. So I'm going to go over my gear, give you some tips of what you can do in each slot for the budget options, and then I'm going to go talk about, because after seeing the interview and seeing how Chris is pretty much just being asked the same questions over and over again, but I do think that 3.16 could be good, and I do hope that, because he's really willing to make changes, but I just wanted to talk about why 3.15 feels so bad in terms of making builds compared to 3.14. But let's get straight into the gear and the budget options for this character. So for my items, I'm going to go over each piece of them, and I'm going to have like a PoE trade link pulled up pretty much of a budget option that you can do. So for the weapon, of course, everyone knows that this weapon's pretty good. Not the best by any stretch of the imagination, but still probably like pretty unobtainable for most people. It is a Shaper Claw. Now let's keep in mind that the claw does not need to be Shaper, and just because we're using Eternity Shroud does not mean that every single item needs to be shaped. So for like the budget option, you don't need every single item to be shaped. So for instance, we can just use Touch of Anguishes, and Touch of Anguishes are 1 chaos each. For a good roll is probably a little bit more. Perfect rolls, like you can see, this roll is pretty good for 5 chaos. So there are a lot of options. This one's also 5, but make sure not to get the corrupt on it, because if you get the corruption on it, it removes the life gain on hit, and the life gain on hit is part of the reason why this build is so good. So you don't need to go for a shape Touch of Anguish, but if you were to go for a shape Touch of Anguish, you can just get a Trash to Treasure, or you can try to buy one already pre-done. Is there really none for sale right now? I guess everyone's offline right now, so you can get one for around like 3x. So there's actually quite a few of them, but that's pretty much because people are trying to play the build. So that's a budget option. You don't really need to use the shield. You can use 2 claws at the start. The Prism Guardian is a little bit more expensive. You would probably want to Trash to Treasure it. So I know someone in my chat actually bought a shield from Cute Dog for 13 exalts. But Prism Guardian is actually not worth that much as shaped influence, because you can get Trash to Treasure for like 3.7x and do it yourself on an Archon Kite Shield. Now next we have the Helm. So the Helm, the main thing is you want the Helm to have Berserk buff effect. And it's very, very important that you have that. So that should be the #1 thing that you look for. So for the Helm, if you want it to be shaped, it's going to be a little bit harder. It's kind of hard to see any. So basically this one's pretty good, 1x 15 hours ago, but it doesn't seem like there's that many choices. Now if you really can't get a shaped helm, you need to go for the next best choice, which is pretty much just using a non-shaped helm. So you just get rid of this search and then look for something with life. And you should be able to find one for like 10 to 20C or whatever your budget may be. Make sure it is Berserk has 30% increased buff effect. It is very, very important that you have that. Now, the next you have the 6-link Eternity Shroud, and I do have a good corruption on mine, but you really don't need a good corruption to start off with. As I'm saying, you can get this build done extremely, extremely cheaply. You can see a 6-link Eternity Shroud not corrupted is 3 exalts. Now, if possible, you want to try to get one that has 5% roll, so you don't need to divine it a bunch. So this one is perfect. So it's like 3 to 3.5x. And this is actually like pretty much the baseline cost of a 6-link chest piece in a lot of cases, because that's just the cost of fusings. Now, Call of the Brotherhood is extremely affordable. As you can see, I don't even have a shaped Call of the Brotherhood in both slots, but you can see it runs around 65-70 chaos. I probably, if you were on a super budget, I would not go for 2 shaped Call of the Brotherhoods right away, as I think shaped Call of the Brotherhoods are... Oh, this guy's selling it for 20x. I'll probably buy it after I finish recording this video. So, very, very good investment. A lot of different stuff that you can do. And like each piece of gear, you could always bring down the budget a lot by not going shaped. And you only lose 5% elemental damage as extra chaos damage. It does add up if you get a lot of pieces that aren't shaped. But that's the beauty of the build. You can slowly upgrade each piece of gear and have infinite damage scaling potential. So it's same exact thing for the spike gloves. These gloves I have for the 2 additional nearby enemies. Now the main thing about this gloves is you pretty much just want the life resist attack speed if possible. Now, if you can't afford strikes to additional nearby enemies, you can always get the Tribal Fury Anoint on the amulet instead. But for the gloves, you could pretty much just go for something like this, shaped with some life and resist, and then go for Anoint, and that's probably the cheapest option. If you really want to go 2 strikes, you could go for non-shaped. So you can see those gloves are like 20 chaos or so. So you could just go strikes to additional enemies, but I don't really think you can get strikes to additional enemies for cheap. And baseline is like 13x because that's pretty much how much it costs in order to make the gloves, right? So probably not the best idea to go for this right away if you're on a budget. So if you're on a budget, just get some shaped gloves with a lot of resist. It will help you out with gearing. And just get the Anoint on the amulet. And on the topic of the amulet, all you're looking for is some life, multi, and then it can have anything else. You just want to have a suffix to be able to craft on increased effect of non-damaging ailments, and that's pretty much it. And this amulet should be relatively cheap, right? Getting a life, multi. Let's check it out. So let's just take a look at it. So life, let's just put it at like 70 life, and then multi like at 30. And those are pretty much the only stats you need. If you can get any sort of resist, it's pretty good. And this is how you look for Shaper Influence. So it's like 30-40 chaos. And you could just look for one with like an open suffix to craft it on. And that's pretty much all you need. It's like 50 chaos. And this one's pretty good, right? So there's a lot of different options that you can do. And you could really adjust how much you spend by just adding another mod in or so. So make sure to get that life, multi, additional effective non-damaging ailments, and that's all you need. Now the boots are something you can spend a lot of money on. A lot of people run into the issue that you're trying to get like the best pair of boots in the game with increased effective tailwind. But the fact of the matter is you can pretty much get away with just tailwind and shaper influence, and you can go with something that's not so great for like 3x to 4x. So you can expect that you're probably going to spend a lot of money on the boots, because I do think that tailwind is extremely good. So there's stuff like this, 5x. And ideally, you want to have life with move speed. And it doesn't seem like some of these boots have that. Some of these boots are actually like fixable though. So this one here, you can craft on life. So this one's fine, right? You can just craft on life. And this is 6 exalts. If you could possibly get an enchant on the boots with like pen or anything that's useful, it would be really good. Like this one here is shaped as avoid ailments. So there's a lot of options that you have. It's only when you try to get like an increased effect of tailwind with that Maven orb that the stuff becomes really expensive. So when you're going for a budget version of this build, for your armor pieces, you don't want to get any Maven orb elevated stuff because that's pretty much just because Maven orbs are extremely expensive right now. I did not mean to go into the map. I just wanted to check the price of the Maven orbs, but Maven orbs are what makes the stuff cost a lot. I think Maven is not really that profitable to do anymore. So Maven orb is like almost 5 exalts. So lastly, we have the belt slot. And we have, the belt is like 2x for Stygian. If you got a Stygian, you can just buy it like this and then roll it with essences. Or you can try to buy one with life and resist. Generally, if you buy one with life and resist, it's going to be a lot more expensive. Now, you might not be able to afford a Stygian, so you can just buy a letter belt. And just get one with some life and resist, and it's probably like pretty cheap. So you can type it in like this if you want to look for a life resist belt. And then you go to total resistance, and then just type in like 100. And it should probably be like 40-50 chaos, and all these belts are fine. Try to get one so you can craft on wet on it, and it should be good. So you can see every single piece of gear I found here had an easy budget option for you to transition into. So don't be afraid of an Eternity Shroud build. It's a build kind of like the Aura Stacker. You have a lot of room to grow. And I did kill the Fear on this build, and I will be showcasing that in the highlights section for today. But Flask, again, everything is relatively affordable except Bottle Faith. Bottle Faith is obviously very, very expensive. I think it's like 20 exalts now or something. But you don't need to use a Bottle Fave. There's other flasks that are pretty good. And one way to look at how good something is, and you can just go here. If you want to see what other flasks could be good, you can always go into POB, go to sort by, I think any type, go to flask. And I think Aziri's Promise is really, really good. So this will pretty much sort it and tell you what are the best flasks. So you can see Vessel of Vinktar. I don't use a Vessel of Vinktar. It has 47 out of 50 charges. So Aziri's Promise is really, really good. So you can see there's other options so you can use besides Bottle of Faith. So don't be afraid of the cost of the build because you see a Bottle of Faith. There's always other options. And all these other stuff is really affordable. Even my Watcher's Eye. So all these cluster jewels are less than 1 exalt. And the jewels themselves are extremely affordable because no one really uses claws or dual wielding. And the Watcher's Eye is a big issue for a lot of people, but this Watcher's Eye, you pretty much just need Wrath conversion. And Hatred is good on top. You can see it's like 8x, but you can get a different Hatred mod or Precision mod with the Wrath Watcher's Eye, and it's all very cheap. So you can pretty much buy a Wrath conversion one for only like 30 chaos. And you want to try to find one with maybe some precision, but if you want to step it up a little bit, get 2 mods on it. But it's really not necessary. The damage is more than enough, even with Touch of Anguish. And that's pretty much it for the builds, budget build section, right? Everything I showed you, I found a budget option for you on the trade website for you to do. And it does show you that there is a budget option for this. And you can obviously slowly upgrade your character until you have like 30 to 40 million pop DPS. But now I wanted to talk about build diversity and why 3.15 is so bad compared to 3.14, because I saw this interesting post on Reddit. So I saw this picture on Reddit and it actually encapsulates very well the problem with 3.15 and general nerfing of the way they did. Because it really seems like GGG doesn't really understand like the best way to balance all the skills, and they felt like everything was just overtuned. And the easiest way, of course, and also the laziest way, is to just give everything a chop across the board of 50% damage nerf, right? And what they did to do that was they nerfed all of the support gems by like 20 to 30% in terms of total damage, not really even realizing how it would affect every single build, because every single build gets affected differently by support gems, and some like 20 to 30% nerfs to the support gems affect some builds really, really negatively and multiplicatively compared to other builds. So one of them, unintentional nerf, was like probably Swift Brand, which really kills Penance Brand for solo play because of the inability to get that much cast speed. But that's just something that happens as a natural byproduct of just cutting every single support gem that they deemed overpowered by a random numerical number. But if you just broad spectrum nerf every single build in the game, what happens is that you have the DPS of the build. So say this is like 30 mil, this is the top of the line, or 100 mil, and this is like your Flicker Strike or any replica Forbidden Shaco builds with any like high DPS or elemental hit. And then down here you have like the bad builds, like Conversion Trap, the builds that no one plays, just useless stuff. And then down here you have like the semi-good builds, the kind of like meme builds that people try out, like maybe like Earth Shatter or any of the mediocre builds, like pretty much any like off-meta builds that people enjoy doing. Not really sure what they are, but maybe you have like some weird Cyclone build or something like that. But these are just like the builds that not many people really try. And then these are the more meta builds, probably like Toxic Rain. And what else? I guess like down here you have like Spectral Throw, right? A Wild Strike or some other builds that has like borderline DPS and doesn't feel really great to play, but you can do all the content and it's acceptable, right? But now 3.15 hits. Everything has been nerfed by 50%, it looks like. Everyone's damage is cut in half. So what happens is up here you still have the insane builds, Aura Stackers, Forbidden Right Totems, for instance, Spectral Shield Throw, and the old meta skills like Elemental Hit even. Like the top skills like Cast on Crit, Instacking Wander, all the best builds in the game, right, are still at the very top, and they still have the DPS to feel relatively godlike. They're not as godly as before, but they're still like trucking along, right? And then here you have like the borderline builds that are minimum viable. And this is probably like Toxic Rain or like any of the like pretty good builds in the past that would make them feel really good. But now you barely have enough damage to do like everything or all the content in the game. But that's fine, right? Because you're still able to do everything and you're not like the best build in the world, but you're still able to clear everything in the game and you don't really have that many complaints. But then you reach down to the level of builds that were fringe and borderline before, like Spectral Throw, Crackling Lance, or any of the really bad skills in general, or some bad like Shockwave Totem build, or I don't even know, like basically a lot of skills fall into this category down here now, right? Because most skills are in the bottom half. Not everyone plays the meta build. So what that means is that these builds that had like 3 million POB DPS from before now have like 1 million, 1.5 million to 2 million. So what happens to those skills now is that they are just unable to play the game. They go to red maps, they do conquerors, each boss takes forever. And because it takes so long, most builds in this game don't have the defense, especially in softcore, to actually be able to stand around, take hits. They don't have the recovery rate and they just end up dying. And what happens when you die 6 times? You lose the portal, you lose the fight, and then they get mad and they quit the game. Or they try to re-roll to something else. And that re-rolling is what creates this build diversity that Chris probably sees. He probably sees all of these people playing the non-meta builds, the off-meta builds, the builds that have different skills because people like those skills. Like maybe it's like Viper Strike or Reeve or something like that. And then they realize that they just don't have the damage. They can't actually do hard red maps with mods. They can't actually farm Deli. They can't actually kill Cyrus. They can't do hard invitations or whatever. And they just don't have the DPS to make it feel like it's worth playing the build anymore. When before it would be enough to feel viable. So they re-roll and then they try another build and it's still in the same category down here because most of the builds, 75% of them, don't actually work. And that's just how it is currently, and that's why 3.15 feels really bad and why it's hard to actually make viable builds for it. So if we go look at PoE Ninja, we can kind of see this thing in action, and what happens is that build diversity is gone because everyone crams themselves into this portion right here because these are the builds that can actually do all the content and still feel relatively good. So that's why you have like Spectral Shield Throw, Race Spectre, Cast on Crit, Forbidden Rite Totems, and more. And then you also have Aura Stackers, which is actually getting more and more popular. And Caustic Arrow, I guess, is like a fringe skill. And then you see that most of these skills are pretty meta skills. Of course, that is not to say that there's more meta skills that exist outside of what you see on PoE Ninja that can do everything. But part of this is the reason why I keep just doing Eternity Shroud builds over and over and over again. Not only because it is hard to trade in the current league, but because Eternity Shroud builds have always been up here in DPS, right? With every single skill possible, because Eternity Shroud is the ultimate DPS build. And what that means is you can play so many different skills with the build archetype because it's still up here and you still feel like a god. But if I was able to play another archetype, like a block build, the skill diversity would be limited by so much more because everything would be down here now and it wouldn't be viable. So you would have to play the best skill possible. So what Eternity Shroud is doing is allowing me to play different skills that wouldn't normally be viable at the current 3.15. So that's why I feels like I'm trying to push so many Eternity Shroud builds, because it allows me to explore different skills that I know are dead with different build archetypes with the Eternity Shroud archetype, because it's so broken in terms of damage scaling that it allows me to play more different skills. And that's just a sad fact of it. Now, not everyone's playing Eternity Shroud, so a lot of people are just stuck playing Spectral Shield Throw forever, and then they try another build and quit because it's not the same. But that's not to say there's not a lot of archetypes or of builds like Frenzy Charge stacking that work. But it's just sad to see that most of the bad builds, or not bad builds, but like fringe builds that aren't like super meta, are just not able to be played anymore. And it also makes build diversity a lot worse. But that's just my two takes on it, on why 3.15 feels bad to play in terms of trying out different builds or different build archetypes, and why I'm playing Eternity Shroud so much. But now I'm going to showcase some Feared on the actual good character, the Lightning Strike, which I believe is probably my favorite character. And I did get an 80 Quant Feared because someone asked for it. I did die, but that's how it goes.
You can't fall asleep when you're counting stars. Get it together. Your mind can't sleep when you let it serve. Now you wanna see me fall from a golden mile. I can see you at the call. Think about it, ring won't tell you what I saw. When you break it up, you'll see who had it all. You had it all. You said you wanted to fall into oblivion. Forget about the world we're living in. Fall into oblivion, oblivion. I'm going in. Fall into oblivion. Fall into oblivion. Forget about the world we're living in. Fall into oblivion, I'm going in.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I hope everyone enjoyed the Feared kill. This build is extremely good. I am going to try to min-max it more. I'm going to try to buy the shape Call of the Brotherhood if it's still there. And it's actually gone. Someone bought it. And that's just how it is. Or maybe the person went offline. It seems like the person went offline, but do not pay 30x for it. Maybe another day, right? Make the video, lose the Call of the Brotherhood, but it's okay. It's more important to make the video. But hopefully you guys will try to build out, especially after I gave you all the budget options for the build and showed that it's all doable. It's probably what, like less than 20x, I would say. Probably less than that even to put everything together. Maybe the gems cost a little bit, but definitely viable as a second build of the league, and definitely viable if you don't have that much currency to start with, and definitely a build kind of like the Aura Stacker with infinite scalability and a lot of things to optimize. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you try to build out, and I hope you understand why 3.15 is not that great because of their broad spectrum nerfs that made no real sense besides it being easy to do. But I hope you find more mirrors and exalts than I do, and see you next time. Bye.